Part 1. Your Shih Tzu is not listening to your words. It is reading you. Have you ever noticed something strange about your Shih Tzu? You might say a long sentence like, "Don't worry, I'll be right back." And your dog suddenly becomes anxious before you even touch the door. Or you whisper walk very softly. And somehow, your Shih Tzu jumps up like it just heard fireworks. It feels almost like they understand every word you say. But after living with Shih Tzus for many years, I can tell you something that surprises a lot of owners. Your Shih Tzu is not actually understanding most of your words. What it is understanding is you. Shih Tzus are one of the most human-focused dog breeds ever created. For hundreds of years, these little dogs lived inside imperial palaces in China. They were not bred to hunt, guard,
becomes the message,
or pull sleds. Their entire role in life was to stay close to people and respond to them. Over generations, this shaped a brain that is extremely sensitive to human signals. When you live with a Shih Tzu long enough, you start to realize they are constantly watching you, your posture, the way you breathe, the tone of your voice, even the rhythm of your footsteps across the room. These small details are the language your dog actually understands. Science backs this up in a fascinating way. Researchers studying dog cognition discovered that the canine brain processes human voices in a surprisingly similar way to the human brain. In studies done at Eötvös Loránd University in Hungary, scientists found that dogs respond strongly to emotional tone in speech. In other words, the melody of your voice matters more than the words themselves. You can say "good dog" in an angry voice, and your Shih Tzu will read it as negative. But if you say nonsense words with warmth and a relaxed tone, your dog reads it as affection. From the dog's perspective, the emotional signal is the message. And if you watch a Shih Tzu carefully, you will see this happening all the time. Imagine you stand up from your chair suddenly. Before you even speak, your Shih Tzu looks up. If you walk toward the door with a certain pace, your dog begins to follow you. If you move toward the kitchen slowly at night, that tiny face appears behind you,
the brain of a dog connects
already predicting that something interesting might happen near the refrigerator. None of this requires language. Your Shih Tzu is simply reading patterns in your behavior. After years of working with this breed, I have noticed something that many first-time owners misunderstand. They think training a Shih Tzu means teaching lots of commands. Sit, stay, come, down. Those commands can be useful, of course, but the real communication between you and your dog happens long before any command is spoken. It happens in your daily habits. Your dog learns the meaning of your movements long before it learns the meaning of your words. This is why Shih Tzus sometimes seem almost psychic. Many owners tell me their dog waits by the door a few minutes before they arrive home. Some people think the dog hears the car from far away, but often that is not the whole story. Dogs are incredible pattern detectors. If you usually come home around the same time each day, your Shih Tzu's brain builds an internal prediction of that moment. As the routine approaches, the dog becomes alert and moves toward the door. To us, it feels mysterious, but inside the dog's brain, it is simply a well-learned pattern. Here is the important takeaway for every Shih Tzu owner watching this. If your dog does not seem to listen, it might not be ignoring you. It might be receiving mixed signals from your behavior. If your voice says one thing, but your body language says another, your dog will trust the body language every time. Dogs evolved to read physical signals, not human grammar. So instead of focusing only on commands, start paying attention to the signals you send without realizing it. Your tone of voice, the speed of your movements, the calmness or tension in your body. Your Shih Tzu is reading those signals all day long. In fact, if you live with a Shih Tzu, You are participating in a quiet conversation that never stops, even when no one says a single word. And once you begin to see that invisible conversation happening,
The leash itself.
but something interesting changes. Your dog starts making a lot more sense. Behaviors that once felt random suddenly become predictable. Because your Shih Tzu was never just listening to your words. It was listening to you. Part 2. Why your Shih Tzu can predict what you're about to do.
Look at you paying attention.
If you live with a Shih Tzu,
Good job, buddy.
you
did
have
great.
probably seen this happen many times. You quietly stand up from the couch, and before you even say anything, your dog runs to the door. You touch the snack cabinet, and
Who's a
suddenly,
good dog?
a small furry
Yes,
face
you are.
appears beside
You're
you.
such a good boy.
You pick up the leash, and your Shih Tzu starts jumping like it just won the lottery. Many owners think their dog understands the word walk or treat. But the truth is often simpler and more fascinating. Your Shih Tzu is predicting what will happen next. The brain of a dog works heavily through something scientists call associative learning. This idea has been studied in animal behavior for more than 100 years,
Actually understanding most of the
beginning
words.
with the famous experiments of Ivan Pavlov. In simple terms, the brain constantly connects events together. One signal leads to one action, and that action leads to one result. When the same sequence repeats again and again, the brain begins to anticipate the outcome before it actually happens.
Good
For a
dog.
Shih Tzu living in your home, daily life is full of these repeating patterns. When you put on your shoes, it usually means you are about to leave the house. When you open the refrigerator late in the evening, sometimes a small piece of food appears. When you pick up the leash from the hook near the door, a walk almost always follows. Your dog does not need a spoken command to understand these things. After enough repetition,
Becomes
the brain forms a prediction. This prediction system is extremely strong in dogs because their survival historically depended on noticing patterns in the environment. Even though your Shih Tzu now lives in a comfortable home, the brain still works the same way. It is constantly scanning your behavior and building connections between what you do and what happens next. This is why many Shih Tzus appear to know things before they happen. They are not reading your mind. They are reading your routine. If every evening you pick up the leash at a certain time, your dog begins preparing for the
dog
walk
senses your
before the
emotions.
leash even moves. If every morning you walk toward the kitchen after waking up, your Shih Tzu will often follow you before breakfast appears. To us, it feels like intuition. To the dog, it is simply a learned pattern.
Remembers how you make it
Understanding this mechanism changes the way you train and interact with a Shih Tzu. Instead of relying only on verbal commands,
feel. You really are the center
it
of my
becomes
world.
much more effective to control the signals that come
Your Shih
before
Tzu is
an
not actually
action.
understanding most of
If the
words.
leash always appears before a walk, the leash itself becomes the message. If a certain cabinet always contains
The
treats,
melody of your voice
the
matters more
sound
than
of that
words.
door opening becomes a signal stronger than any word. In other words, your Shih Tzu is not waiting for instructions.
Hello
It is
there, you
constantly
miss me?
building a map of
You're
your
such a
habits.
Good dog.
Every repeated action you make becomes part of that map. And the more predictable your routine is, the easier it becomes for your dog to understand the world around it. Part 3. The biggest mistake Shih Tzu owners make changing the rules.
Ready? Go get the
After working with Shih Tzus for many years, there is one pattern I see again and again in homes where behavior problems start appering. The dog is not the real problem. The problem is that the rules keep changing. Let me give you a very common example. A Shih Tzu jumps onto the couch and sits next to its owner. One day the owner laughs, pets the dog, and says it is cute. The next day, the same dog jumps onto the couch again. But now the owner is tired and suddenly says
good
no
doggy.
and pushes the dog down.
Yes, you are.
From the
Both
human
you are
point
good
of view,
dogs.
this seems like a small moment. But inside the dog's brain, something very confusing just happened. Dogs learn through a system scientists call operant conditioning. The principle is simple. Behaviors that lead to good outcomes tend to repeat. Behaviors that lead to negative outcomes tend to disappear. But this system only works if the outcome is predictable. When the same action sometimes leads to praise and sometimes leads to punishment, the dog cannot understand which rule is correct. For a Shih Tzu, this inconsistency creates a strange situation. The dog begins testing the behavior again and again because the result is unpredictable. One time, it works. Another time, it fails. The brain keeps trying because the reward occasionally appears. In psychology, this is called a variable reward pattern, and it is one of the strongest ways to reinforce behavior. Casinos use the exact same principle in slot machines. The reward appears randomly, so the behavior keeps repeating. This is why many owners feel their Shih Tzu is being stubborn. The dog jumps on people even though it has been told not to. It begs at the table even though it has been scolded before. But if we look closely, the pattern usually becomes clear. At some point in the past, the behavior worked. The dog received attention, food, or affection. From the dog's perspective, the behavior is still worth trying. Shih Tzus are especially sensitive to this because they are companion dogs. Attention from their owner is one of the most powerful rewards they can receive. Even a reaction like pushing them away or speaking loudly can still feel like attention. To a Shih Tzu, attention is often better than being ignored. The key to avoiding this confusion is something simple but extremely important: stable rules. If your Shih Tzu is allowed on the couch, that rule should stay the same every day. If the dog is not allowed on the couch, that rule should also stay the same every day. The brain of the dog relaxes when it understands the pattern of the environment. When the pattern is stable, the dog no longer needs to test the behavior repeatedly. In homes where the rules are clear, Shih Tzus usually become calmer and easier to live with. They know where they are allowed to go, what behaviors bring rewards, and what behaviors simply do not work. The moment the world becomes predictable, the dog's behavior begins to stabilize as well. And this leads to a powerful realization for many owners. When a Shih Tzu seems confused or difficult, it is often not because the dog refuses to learn. It is because the signals coming from the human world are changing too often for the dog to understand. Part 4. Your Shih Tzu is emotionally connected to you more than you think. There is one thing about Shih Tzus that many people only realize after living with them for a long time. These little dogs are not just watching your actions. They are feeling your emotional state. I have seen this countless times with owners. A person comes home after a stressful day. They sit down quietly, not saying anything. Within a minute, the Shih Tzu slowly walks over, climbs onto their lap, and simply stays there. No command was given. Nothing was trained. But the dog somehow sensed that something was different. This is not just a sweet story. There is real science behind it. A famous study published in the journal Science showed that when dogs and their owners look into each other's eyes, both experience an increase in a hormone called oxytocin. Oxytocin is often called the bonding hormone. It is the same chemical that strengthens the emotional connection between a mother and her child. In simple terms, when you and your dog share calm attention, both of your brains enter a more connected emotional state. For companion breeds like the Shih Tzu, this effect can be even stronger. These dogs were bred for centuries to live in close contact with humans. Their survival and purpose depended on staying close to people, reading their moods, and responding to them. That is why Shih Tzus often mirror their owner's emotional energy. If the home environment is calm, predictable, and relaxed, the dog usually becomes calm as well. But if the environment is tense, loud, or unpredictable. The dog may become anxious,
Your Shih Tzu is
clingy,
patterns in your behavior.
or restless. Sometimes owners try to fix these behaviors by correcting the dog. But the dog is often reacting to something deeper in the environment. When you slow down your movements, speak calmly, and create a stable daily routine, something interesting happens. The dog's nervous system begins to settle as well. The behavior problems that once seemed mysterious often start fading on their own. In other words, your Shih Tzu is not just learning commands from you,
Becomes a signal.
it is constantly synchronizing with your emotional state.
The leash itself.
When we
becomes a
look at
message.
everything together, a clear picture appears.
You want this.
Your
Want
Shih
it all?
Tzu
Okay,
does
go get it.
not experience the world the same way humans do. It is not listening primarily to your words. It is reading your tone, your body language, and your habits. It is constantly building predictions based on your daily routine. It is trying to understand rules in its environment, and it is deeply connected to the emotional atmosphere of the home. When those signals are clear and consistent, the dog feels safe. When those signals become confusing, the dog becomes uncertain. This is why living with a Shih Tzu can feel so special. They are not just pets that follow commands. They are incredibly sensitive companions that quietly study the people they love every single day. And the more clearly you communicate with them through your actions, your consistency, and your calm presence, the stronger that invisible bond between you and your Shih Tzu becomes.